Huntington resident Richard Schoeller has an interesting gift. He's a professional medium who says he's able to communicate with those who passed on.
I am clairaudient and clairsentient where I hear them and feel them, and then a bit clairvoyant where I see. Okay, so I have a little bit of each, and it comes in at different times in different, let's say, volumes or intensities. Sometimes I can hear people a little more clearly, and I literally hear the words in my head.
He was recently the very first guest on Carrie Ann Flanagan-Brodsky and Joe Giaquinto's Spirit Connection radio show. But perhaps most interesting is how Richard realized his mediumship ability.
I used to be a funeral director. I spent my life as a funeral director starting at age 17. I went into funeral service, and this is a true story. My grandfather, my mother's father died. My father at his wake jokingly said to me, "Why don't you become an undertaker? No one will ever talk back to you." So I was able to prove him wrong, and we weren't prepared for that. I was attending a meditation class because funeral service is a very stressful career. And one night I came home from meditation class. I walked into my apartment and I started to see with my eyes this experience of pins and needles or snow, almost like when some of us would remember black and white television when it would go to snow. My heart started to race and I thought, oh God, I'm having a heart attack. So I called a friend of mine and I said to John, I think I'm having a heart attack. He said, I'll come right over. I said, no, just talk to me for a minute. With that, all four of my grandparents showed up in my bedroom. I said to John, I've got company, and I hung up the phone. And in truth, I hit the floor crying like a baby because my logical mind, now I had been at all of my grandparents' funerals, I had handled my mother's funeral as a funeral director. In my logical mind, I could see them, I must be on my way out. And they laughed and they said, no, you can just see us now. That surprised me. So I said to them after about 40 minutes of conversing with them, what do I do with this? They said, don't worry, you'll find out. And they left. I called my friend John and said, you're not going to believe what happened. Now, he's a psychotherapist, so he thought I had a psychotic break. So he asked an important question. He said to me, is there anyone there for me? Thinking if I had had a psychotic break, I would only talk about the voices I was hearing and how they related to me. And I said, yeah. And I described his uncle, whom I'd never met. And I said, your uncle's here, this is what he looks like. And he said to me, you just described my mother's brother. It was through him, he went to see a woman who was an energetic healer. Her name is Carol Abramowitz. She said to him, you're opening up psychically. He said, no, you got someone else. She said, I'm seeing a man with a blue beaded necklace. And at that time I was wearing a blue beaded necklace. She wrote down the name of a spiritualist church and said he needs to go to this church. So I walked in to the spiritualist church and found what I considered to be home. They helped me to understand the ability that I have, and for the past 14 years, I've been studying the religion, science, and philosophy of spiritualism. I've been working as a medium professionally since 1998, and I left funeral service.
He says after discovering his ability, things got a little awkward in the funeral business.
One day I was working at the funeral home, and this was shortly after I opened to this ability. And while I was standing there, now I had not met the family yet. The hearse driver was downstairs having coffee, and I was standing in the lobby alone waiting for the limousine to pull up. And with that, the woman in the chapel came waltzing out into the lobby clairvoyantly. She literally did not get up out of the casket, but her spirit was present at her own funeral. And she said to me, I know you can hear me. And I thought, oh God. So I said, okay, yes, I can hear you. In my mind, I telepathically communicated back to her, yes, I can hear you. And she said, you've got to tell my husband my legs don't hurt. So I laughed and I thought, oh yeah, sure, I'll tell him. But I also thought I was blowing her off. I thought by saying, yes, I'll tell him, it would, just end the conversation. But then I said, I don't know who your husband is. She said, don't worry, you will. And she flashed a photo or a picture of him in my mind. So I thought, okay. She disappeared. She went back into the chapel clairvoyantly. And I kept thinking to myself, what are the chances that that man that she flashed in my mind's eye is the man that's going to pull up in the limousine? 2 minutes later, the limousine pulls up. The limo driver opens the back door, and it's the man that she flashed in my mind. So I would not normally go up to someone and say something. This was the first time I had this experience. At the end of the funeral, I would always go up to the next of kin and say to them, I'm sorry for your loss. If there's anything we could do at the funeral home to help you further, let us know. At the end of the funeral, I went up to him and said those words, and then I took a breath and said, and I bet if I could hear your wife talking, she'd tell me her legs don't hurt. He burst into tears crying. He said, I hope not. That's what gave her the most pain before she died. And I looked at him and I said, don't worry, she's in a better place than you or I. And I walked away. And that was a moment of learning to trust. I would not walk up to someone and say, I'm a medium. Guess what? Your wife is here. I believe very strongly in maintaining people's, I'm going to say privacy or dignity. I guess that's the best way to put it. Anyhow, that was one of my experiences as a funeral director. There were times where there was once I was in the preparation room and aware of somebody's presence, and at the cemetery as a funeral director aware of their presence at the grave. And I said, you know what, I can't do this anymore.
Richard said he pretty much kept this ability to himself for a while before telling his parents.
My mother said, you got to prove it to me. So I described her Aunt Sophie, who died a year before I was born. My mother said, I can't accept that because you could have seen photographs of my aunt. I said, fair enough. I said, but she's telling me to tell you she and Uncle Billy weren't married. My mother got very upset with the information because that was a family secret. She wanted to know who told me. And I said to her, your Aunt Sophie's telling me right now. My father looked at me and put his finger in my face and said, you better tell me something only I would know if you expect me to believe you. So I talked to him about his Aunt Lily. Now, she died in the 50s. I was born in the 60s. I described her, and he said, well, you could have seen a photograph. I said, well, she's telling me to remind you of Sundays in the summer, you and your brothers taking a subway to her apartment. And he said, yeah. And I said, and then she'd put you back on the subway and take you to Coney Island. And all of a sudden he looked at me and his throat started to tighten a little bit. And I said, and she'd stop before you went onto the beach at Needix for orange sodas and hot dogs. My father burst into tears. My father doesn't show his emotions that easily. He started crying and he said, I never told you that. I said, I know. He said, the only way you would know that is if my aunt told you. I said, she is right now. He asked me in that moment, did you always have this ability? And I looked at him and I said, I flashed back and remembered to when I was 6. And I said, Mom, Dad, when I was 6, I used to call you into my bedroom every night because I was seeing people walk through the walls. They got defensive. They said, we thought you were dreaming. I said, no, I'm remembering. This is not a judgment or an indictment. I screamed one night, leave me alone, and it stopped happening. So I turned it off. My grandparents came back in when they felt I had enough ego strength to deal with the information, and they helped me to turn it back on again. See, we all have this ability. Every one of us was born with this ability. Some of us will realize this ability in this lifetime, some of us won't. I know all of us have it and can use it.
Richard now uses this ability to help the living as well as those who have passed on.
And I see clients for sessions able to hopefully help alleviate pain, discomfort, grief.
But he says occasionally he does encounter skeptics who are not entirely convinced of his abilities.
With regard to skeptical people, I'm here to present information. That's what I'm able to do. And to the best of my ability, I will make statements as opposed to questions. I will say to you, to the best of my ability, I have your grandmother next to you. I will state whatever I can and leave the information with you. I did a taping of a program, and they had a skeptic. And they asked us, can you read for him? And I told him about his grandparents to the best of my ability and his grandfather on his father's side. And I said, I know they're here with you and I have a young man with you. I tried to bring through the young man because he was the best communicator. And the skeptic said no, no, no to everything. Okay? And I said, that's fine, I can't read for you. But what I was able to do was read for the host. When people are skeptical, I respect their skepticism. I will not force information as long as they allow me to present information. If they don't want to accept the information, that's okay. I'm not here to get into a fight or an argument with anyone. I'm just here to present what I know to be true, and if I can't read for someone, I'll also be direct and honest about that.
Richard says the reason he does this is to use his gift to help other people.
That thrills me when I can stand there in the space to be able to help other people move through life and help people on the spirit side of life let go, make amends, say they're sorry, remind us that they love us. That thrills me.
In Huntington, Chris Schoeller reporting.